All right. Awesome. All right. Good evening, everyone. We're going to wait a couple more minutes to get started. Please share, 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 share. All
There we
right.
go.
Okay. All righty. All righty. Okay. What's normal anyway? Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. So as you're coming in, please share, start a watch party. Remember to post comments, ask questions, be a part of the process. If you are joining us, of course, make sure you use the live video comments. That's a way that we can see your messages coming up and you may see your comment on the screen. So once again, thank you for joining us tonight. Hey, Crawl. All right. Okay. Robin Rucker's on here. Hey, Robin.
Oh, Robert Rucker.
We shout out people as they come in. We're not doing that all night, y'all, though. We just
Not
shout
at
them
all.
out right now because we haven't got started.
Only people like Robin Rucker. We ain't doing that for everybody.
Right, right. We did it for Carl and we did it for Robin Rucker. That's all.
We know.
Okay. So share, start a watch party. And we'll get started here in a moment. All right. Okay. So we'll go ahead because this is going to be a good topic tonight. So I don't want to waste any sort of airtime by any means. So welcome to Truth Be Told. This is our fourth episode, I believe it is now. So we've been doing this Facebook Live gathering of friends talking about various topics. So we started first in the month of May, and now we're here in August. And so this topic tonight is what's normal anyways. I am Stephanie Craw, Dr. Stephanie Craw, the author or podcaster of Free Your Mind with Dr. K. And so I'll let everyone introduce themselves before we jump into our discussion. So, Z, we'll just go on the tile.
All right. So I am Zakia. I am the creator of the Sankofa Experience podcast, the Healing Project, and Pivotal Growth Consulting.
And I am Brandon Davis. I am with the Highly Revered podcast.
I am Courtney Henderson, founder and CEO of Me First Queens, and I'm also a high school counselor in the Charlotte area.
Awesome, awesome. So we are excited about this topic tonight. All of us are educators. And so August is the busiest time. All of us have either been back to our respective institutions or like Courtney and I, we just went back this week. And y'all, this pandemic is real. For the past several months, a lot of colleges and K through 12 institutions have been processing how are they going to create a space for students to return this fall, or are we doing online? What's happening? And so our topic tonight is what's normal anyways. So everyone's talking about this being the new normal. And so this morning, as we were preparing for this, I decided, me being me, to figure out what the definition of normal is. So I used my handy dandy phone, asked my friend Webster, define normal for me. And one of the definitions of normal is conforming to a type, standard, or regular pattern. So when we think about that particular definition, I asked myself, what is the standard and who is setting it as we're talking about this pandemic and we're talking about education? So I want to put out a question to start our discussion for my co-panelists here. Tell me, like, what are your current, let's just start. What are your current feelings? Let's start with feelings. What are your current feelings about how education is being viewed and handled right now as it relates to COVID and how they're going to serve students this year? So I don't know who wants to start off with that.
I'll go. So I feel like initially when we first got into the pandemic, education was very much, on it in terms of like shutting everything down, making sure everybody was safe and sending students home as well as their staff. I feel like it's become more of a political issue more recently, and there's a lot of pressure from the president to governors and, you know, those leadership people putting pressure down on the school districts to come back. And so I think it makes it really interesting because I feel like at one point our school was going to go back for the first 2 weeks and kind of go on an adjusted schedule for students. But I honestly felt like my district was trying to kill me. Like, I just felt like they didn't care about the fact that, you know, I'm a staff member and I have children, I have a family. I just didn't think it was fair. But I also feel like I was mentioning to some of the panelists earlier, this is one of the first or only situations where I really feel like I'm straddling the fence. Like, I can really see both sides. And as much as, you know, as a parent, I don't really want my kids to go back to school. And I don't want to go back to school. I know how important it is for students to be social and for them to have those connections with their friends and their teachers and everything, and me as a counselor. So I understand the complexity of it, but I really feel like currently, you know, the government and those politicians are kind of putting more pressure on schools to just jump back into it. And I think it's really irresponsible.
Right, I'll go. So for me, I feel like we're in a middle ground, and so I'm coming from a higher ed kind of perspective in this, and I don't have kids, and so for me, going back is a safety issue for me personally, but I don't necessarily have kids that I need to worry about. But I also have family members that I have to go and be around and interact with, and so it puts you in that middle space. I can understand as an administrator in a college the need to go back. I can understand how the deficit financially, you know, institutions, you may not be in a position where you cannot have your students out. You need that revenue coming in. However, the human in me says, like, can't we just wait a semester? Like, can we stop? Can we pause? And then as the administrator, I start to think like, okay, so what does the future look like? You know, what does this mean? How do I plan for this? What kind of incentives or things do I do to make a class, or I'm in recruitment, so how to do that? But then on the other hand, it also scares you, like, I don't know if we can pause, but I want to pause, you know?
So similar to Brandon, so my background has been student affairs, mostly in higher education, but in this past year, I've been in a different arena. But I think about all of my colleagues who are in higher ed, who are the frontline people. So like those admissions counselors, those residential housing staff, the financial aid people like Brandon. I don't have children, so that's not a big concern for me. My family isn't really here local, so me being asymptomatic and taking it to my family, that's not a big issue. But I do think about my colleagues, like the older colleagues that I do work with and their potential families. I think about my coworkers who are the housing staff, who are the ones moving the students in. So similar, like I want to say, can we just pause, like just make the decision to be off for a semester, like really understand what's going on in all aspects. Like in some ways, I feel like we had plenty of time because most of our states shut down, or cities or counties shut down around March, April. It's August. But even now, we still have some uncertainties in regards to like what's going to happen next. And with numbers spiking and lowering, it makes me concerned about bringing students back to our classrooms or to our campuses where now we become a hot spot. So then what is the resolution then? And for many campuses, we don't have the space to move or isolate students who may have the virus, or we don't have the resources in regards to health services to provide them what they need. Like, it's so many different questions that for me, it's like, just let's pause. Like, let's just make the hard decision to take a semester off and like really look at what can we do. And even those schools who are going between reopening or closing, like, it's some questions we have to be asking that may not be out in the public that I really would love for all of us to come together and like actually talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So as y'all were speaking, there are different lanes that y'all all went into. So we have institutional funding and sustainability. We have the idea of leadership decisions, and then we have the concept of how are we taking and caring for people. And so I'm like thinking about which one I want to go in because I think all of them are such critical points. So let's I'm going to go this route of the aspect about financially. So as an institution of higher education, many of us are, our education period, we receive money by butts and seats, right? Tuition revenue coming in, or dollars coming from the state or whatnot. And I had to ask myself the question, as I'm pushing to try to get students enrolled in the course, if a student is not able to focus on the work because they're concerned about coming to campus, or if they are at home, they may not have the resources or the time and space to get the work done. So am I really, as an institution, getting any resources coming in? Because if that student flunks out, then they may flunk out to where they end up getting on a SAP warning. For those that are not in higher education, their financial aid could be in fact impacted because they don't do well academically. You could have the fact that a student does get sick, which then causes them to have to withdraw, which then means it's just like all these different things. Like if we make the decision based off of money, or make the decision based off, well, we need to make our numbers, then it's like we're saying that the value of somebody's life is my enrollment. Like it's like that whole decision to me is kind of insane. And I know as an administrator, I have to think about that. But at the same time, at what point does the institution come, like the people come before the institution? Because without the people, you don't have the institution.
Right.
So, yeah.
So two sides of that for me. So I'm 100% with you. But again, it puts you in that middle ground. So as I'm in Ohio. So in Ohio, a lot of your state funding is based on outcomes, not incomes. All right. So I need course completion. I need you to graduate in order to get funding for a lot of schools who are state funded. And so when you're looking at that, if I don't bring in a class this year, if I don't have people 4 years down the road, I'm in bigger trouble. I'm in a worse situation than I am right now. So that thought of, okay, how do I keep the doors open to this school if I don't have students coming in? And it takes, I know we talked about this earlier, and we'll get to it, about the innovative thinkers and where's the middle ground in that? How do I care for humans, but still keep the doors to my institution open in the future? But then on the opposite end of that, I guess I kind of said it already. If the people aren't there, they're not getting that education. And for real, when I'm talking to parents, they want to be there. They're not really saying like, we want an option. Like we want to know what the option is that we can do to make a choice. In college, like we can do online in college, but can I do it at home? I just need you to make a clear decision on what you're doing so I can make a decision. But it affects everything. And then financially, I've been there. Like I've been there and had those conversations with people where you're having to make those cuts, right? And we all know we had facilities calling and saying, are you gonna make the number? Like, am I gonna have a job? And so if the doors aren't open, yes, my health is safe, but also, can these families feed? Can you pay rent if I don't have a job, right?
Oh, Brandon.
That's a serious topic. I don't want to go too far into that, but
well, man, and I get it. I get the leadership dichotomy, because it's like, I don't want to believe that every leader that's making a decision is thinking about my institution sustainable, are we staying open? But, hearing the aspect of my staff who, if we don't, as you said, we don't make our numbers, then we're going to have to cut people. Like we had a whole bunch of layoffs this summer because we ended up deciding, because of COVID, we had to close, not have athletics. So by us not having athletics, there's staff that we don't need anymore. So if that person was the primary breadwinner of their house, I don't know what their severance was and all of that, they now don't have a job. But at the same time, I had the leadership had to also think about, what about if we do have this and all these people get sick? It's not an easy decision by any means.
It's extremely complex and complicated. And at every step of the process, I'm really trying to give grace to the people who are making the decisions. But sometimes it's hard because it's like nobody talked to me about it. I was telling you guys when we first started this conversation, maybe I wasn't. When we were planning on going back into the building, there had been this team of 8 people that was named that would be responsible for taking temperatures of teachers as they came in the building and students. And guess whose name was on that list of 8? And guess who they didn't talk to? I didn't even know, like, we didn't even know that there was a team coming forth and that they were at least thinking about these 8 people coming together and doing this. It was just a decision that was made. And I was like, well, what if I'm not comfortable doing that? Like, am I going to lose my job because I don't feel comfortable taking people's temperatures and exposing myself and thus my family to whatever I come across? Because it may not just be COVID. I mean, it could be anything I'm coming up against. So, I'm trying to give grace to those people who are making the decisions. But sometimes it's really hard when, like you guys were saying, a decision has been made for you. And then what do you do? Thankfully, we're not going in public, at least for first semester right now. But when that comes up second semester, if I'm on that team still, that's going to be a conversation I have to have with administration. Like, I know y'all decided this, but that's not what you know what I mean? I don't feel comfortable doing that. And what is that going to look like now to make sure that this team is fully staffed and that we can, take care of students and staff when they come in the building?
And then in the K through 12, I feel like I hear an echo. All right, sorry, bear with us a little bit. In the K through 12 sector, for sure, so a lot of stuff has come out since we started talking about this, but there was an article of the woman who says, if I don't send my kids to school, then I have to make a choice between staying with them or going to work. I can't work. I don't have a babysitter. I'm a single parent. And that's a hard decision. Like, that's a life or death decision. Do I risk everybody's life or can I feed them? And people aren't always in the same situation. I talked to my cousin and she was telling me her kids are not going back to school, but she has the means to make that happen. Right. But I have other people who don't have the means. And so I guess today there's not a clear answer of what to do. Nobody's ever going to be happy with whatever the solution is, but there's got to be some type of middle ground that you can come to and say, like, hey, like, let's think about how do we make this happen? How do we make this possible for everybody, at least to be okay?
And I think that's where one thing makes me uncomfortable is the idea of you have, I'm going to say this because this is how I look at it too. You have the people, the have and the have-nots. The haves are making a decision about the life and the future of the have-nots in a lot of aspects. So there are individuals who don't have that flexibility or the grace to be able to say, I'm gonna work from home 3 days out of this week. It's either you come to work or you don't have a job. So that one parent is really having to make that decision of, like you said, Brandon, am I able to feed my family or protect my family? And we should not, as a country, as a society, should not have to make that decision. It should be a lot more. I think there should be more things in place, more support that can support those families, because that's the reality of our society. Like, we don't have this abundance of resources and means to make this happen for everyone. And even like right now, we're talking about students coming back to college campuses. If they don't have the internet, like that was a big conversation when all this happened, was you're sending students back home and they don't have computers. They don't have access to reliable internet. Like, it's so much of what we thought was normal. Again, going back to like what's normal anyway, what we thought was a standard part of everyone's household. It's like, no. And even where I work, I have colleagues who live in the country, and they were saying, like, I don't have reliable internet in the country. I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. And you're a faculty member, but it made me think about, it's not always accessible for everyone. So what we take for granted is not the same and consistent across the board. So it's so much on our plates to consider, to where we're saying we want these things to happen, but what are we doing to support the people that we're putting out there who don't have the access to the resources?
And I think the other part of that though is like now, so we do talk about like we closed schools, we took away one's access to internet and those things by sending them home. But then now the narrative of we need to provide access. So now we're going to open the place back up. And I scratch my head on this because I'm like, it was inequitable before and it's inequitable now. So I'm about to send the people that may not have the resources, may not have a number of things, could be low income, could have various barriers. I'm going to send y'all out like, okay, let's see, we're providing you access, but we know the cases are spiking. So we're going to send you back. And I live in Chicago. I'm going to send you back on the CTA, buses and trains, right? Going to put you on that bus or train for you to go to an institution, college or K through 12, so you can have access to the internet. But I put you in a place, a vehicle that may not be sanitized and clean. And I'm hoping they are, because I believe that was one of the communication things that went out. But let's be real. So we're saying that, you know, we did close schools. So we took away access, but then we're opening up places to give you access. But the whole access piece is a conversation, because why do you now care if I have access when you haven't cared for the past tons of years, when you had the schools have been inequitable? It's like, it's been a problem. And now a pandemic has just continued to expose the problem. And now we're going to say, oh, go ahead. We're going to open these places back up. And now we're going to provide you access. You should have had a process in place for students to have Wi-Fi, or students to have laptops before a pandemic. And now we're going to put you back out here to then also, to me, let's fix the systemic issues that exist within our higher ed, our education system overall. And the pandemic just continues to expose it. It exposes bad leadership, it exposes the inequities, and it exposes just the systemic issues that we have as it relates to serving people of all, socioeconomic statuses. I'm sorry, that access and equity piece is really, it really ticks me off, because if we're going to expose people to COVID when cases are going up so they can have access, but what happens if they all get sick? Like, yeah.
That reminds me of the article that you guys sent out today about, I think it might be in Illinois. And I'm from Chicago. My dad drives for CTA. And that terrifies me. The fact that, kids are going to start coming back on those buses. And I highly doubt if they're all wearing masks and, social, like that goes out the window when you are on city transportation. So I'm concerned about, my dad for sure. But it reminds me of the article you guys sent out today about Illinois schools and how they are, I guess, toying with the idea of sending Black and brown students back first into the classroom as, a way of access. And I feel like, again, I straddle the fence on that, because it's true. Like you said, education is now exposed, and all the inequities and all the socioeconomic disadvantages, like all of that stuff is exposed now. It's all out and open. And so they do need to be able to have access. However, when you target a certain group of people and you label it, oh, we want to make sure our Black and brown students are able to get access, I feel like there's a ploy. Like, I don't know if it's really about access. I feel like it's more experimental, and you know what I mean? I just feel like that's a very slippery slope, because parents of those students are working parents, blue collar in many cases. And so we have several students who are Latino students, our Latino population, where the students are part of the breadwinners as well. And so them being home was really helpful economically for their families, because they were able to work and kind of do school at their own leisure. And so now that you're talking about, possibly going back, now that takes money away from the household. Like Brandon mentioned, you have parents who cannot stay home. Maybe they were able to stay home that first part of everything, but now companies are like, we gave y'all, almost 6-7 months. Now you got to figure something else out. Like, it's definitely exposing everything, but I feel like it's a very slippery slope when you try to target a certain group of people, specifically Black and brown students, into pushing them back in the school building, And then saying that it's because it's for equity and access. Something about that doesn't sit 100% well with me.
So where do you recall how they justify the equity and access by sending the Black and brown kids out there? Because I think the other thing about this thing is we've seen so much misinformation where nothing makes sense. So in the beginning, if you remember, they were saying that African Americans were immune to the COVID for some reason. Something in our DNA made us immune to this thing, whatever. Other things have happened to where now we realize we're more susceptible to dying from it because of other underlying health issues, dealing with healthcare inequities, so on and so forth. But then there was also, I think, an article from a school district in either Washington State or somewhere out Northwest that talked about it was a thing of pretty much saying like they wanted to send Black and brown to see how bad the COVID would be, and they were going to use those kids. So my question, I still want to make sure we get to one of the questions as well from one of our viewers, but the question at this point is like, what data is there that says that this makes the most sense in regards to equity as being justification for sending Black and brown, marginalized, minoritized people of color, like, again, the have and have nots, like, why are we becoming the guinea pigs for all of this? And where's the outcry for that as well?
That's a whole different conversation. Because I don't want to go too much into that one, but I had thought about this a while ago, and I haven't said anything because it gets all over the place. But yeah, when we thought that Black people couldn't catch it, everything shut down. Everybody went home. When we found out Black people were dying from it, we got to get back to the schools. We got to go back in. Like, that's what happened. Literally, the day it was like, Black people, we're actually dying from this more than anybody else. Like, the next week, it was like, all right, y'all, we got to start this economy back up. Let's go. Let's get them back in. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying that's what the timeline looked like.
That's a good point. What
the timeline looked like, I may just be putting that together, but I'm saying the week after we found out Black people were dying, it was all in the news. The next week, the leader of this country was saying, let's go back and start this economy again. It's not us that's dying. And so that's just a different conversation, I guess, from what happened. But I totally agree with you. Like, are we sacrificial? Like, is that what this is? Is this a test? Why do you want to test the vaccine in Africa? What is going on that we need to be the people who are the first? We got to go back because, oh no, Black people need such and such. I don't know about that.
So I hate to interrupt you, but I think that goes to the historical narrative around Black people. Like, we have always been guinea pigs for things because they would always argue and say that we are immune to pain. We don't feel pain. We have whatever they believe is the superpower in our bodies that just prohibits us from being human. So that to me is a reflection of what has already always been there. Like, we were being experimented on when it came to gynecology. We were experimented on when it came to the Tuskegee experiment. Like, we were it's so much. Again, another conversation. It is so much in regards to like why we are the guinea pigs, and then also why we were less protected when you, as you just said, like it makes actual sense in regards to the timeline. Yeah, when it says Black people was pretty much immune to it, oh, we got to shut everything down. The whole country is shut down for about 4 weeks, and we got to isolate it. But then as soon as everybody you start seeing, and mostly our older people, some within the younger ages, we're now and I mean, it's been different. Like, I don't remember anyone saying anything about, it was some elderly, I think in Texas, who were saying like, I'm willing to sacrifice my life to protect someone younger. Where they at? Where they at? Because right now, you talking about sending kids out. That became my biggest issue. You talking about children. So now you're testing on children, young people, and you're looking at, well, they're asymptomatic. Like, I felt so bad that I live in a state where our governor said, yes, sending children back to school, they will end up having the virus, but you won't send them to the hospital. You're going to send them back home. Wait, what? So you're going to send
and that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Z.
My thing is like, you're going to send this kid back home after they've already been around other children. So now you have other children infected to go back home, not to the hospital, home to infect their families. And we don't know what their home environments look like. Like that to me felt like population control. And for those who understand population control, when it comes specifically to Black people, population control. Like you're trying to control the number of individuals within the U.S. because you don't care who dies. Like you're not creating barriers or infrastructure or systems that help actually prevent the situation. Like it's so much where I'm getting frustrated. So I'm gonna stop. I'm going to rant.
I was gonna say something, Z, and that point is actually really poignant because when those Black and brown students who are traditionally underprivileged, right? Then you also have to kind of assume that they are part of the medical disparity that's happening in the country as well. So do they have adequate health care? Are they going to be able to go and then get tested and, the care needed to get over the virus? Probably not historically. So then you have a bigger problem on your hands. But when you're just trying to sacrifice Black and brown lives, I guess, it doesn't really matter. But it continues to perpetuate the whole situation that we're in, whether it's, the medical crisis or just the disparities within, those communities. It's really, really upsetting.
And the justification will be they had poor health. So they had high blood pressure. They had high cholesterol. They had like it's every other reason besides you did not create the proper infrastructures to help us recover from this virus. Instead, it becomes our fault as to why we die from this virus that you knew was here back in January, or no, was it November, December, before it actually wiped out over 100,000 people in the US. Like, seriously? Seriously, you want to sacrifice? Okay, I'm done.
So we'll get to the question. What's up, yo? All right, we have a question on the screen. So what about institutions providing access at home? Do you think that's the institution's responsibility or the government? So I think that I feel like it's both. So our institutions our non-private public institutions are funded by the government, whether it's local government, state government, federal government, they get aid and all of that. So I feel like it's both. I feel like one, the government should be providing money as they've done with like the CARES Act and provided dollars to institutions, and then institutions should be investing in students. Like one of the things I can give my institution kudos for is like literally, it's almost like I didn't know institutions could move so fast a little bit until COVID happened. I'm like, oh, so everything y'all said y'all couldn't do like yesterday, y'all made it happen in like an hour. But that's a whole nother, we'll get to that leadership issue in a minute. So I mean, I was able to see my institution like within the course of like a week or 2 weeks, sending out laptops, sending out Wi-Fi hotspots and making those resources available for students. But also they were depleting some coffers of like some resources that were then funded back, some of it funded back by the government. So I think in a situation like this, it should be a partnership between the government and institutions, because at the end of the day, if all of these people drop out of school, then government, you're going to be paying for them potentially because they may end up having to go on the system because they can't get a livable wage. And so they're going to need those resources. So to me, it's like a partnership that needs to happen between institutions and the government to support these young people and these staff. Like one of the things I will say, I am kind of upset that some institutions did not provide support for their employees. So what I mean by that is that they sent out great to students. I'm not knocking them providing resources for students, but there's some employees that did not have as we said, the Wi-Fi access. They didn't have the computers at home. And once again, my institution did send out some computers to staff. But if you don't have an institution such as that, it's like, figure it out. You got to work from home, figure it out. if you can't work from home, then you figure it out. It's like, I don't think that the investment was made always across the board or made equally so that students could actually be supported in the right way. So I would say a partnership.
I would say both too as well, a little differently though. So I think this is what we pay the government to do. Like, this is why that money keeps coming out of my check every time I get it, is so that you do this. I mean, that's just the truth. You want the tax dollars. However, those tax dollars are to go to help us. So at this point in time, we're in a crisis. You need to be putting that money back into us. And so that's totally their responsibility. However, it becomes the responsibility of the institution, like we said earlier, because as an institution, you will not survive if you don't have the students. Like, you will not, you won't be there. And it's already predicted that like 20% of liberal arts colleges are going to close, or it might be 10, but that's already there. So if you're not giving those students access, if you're not providing them with the way to get the education, whichever way you can, I understand that different institutions have different funding levels. So one student may be able to give people laptops, one institution may have to give you iPads, another institution may have to come up with something else. I totally understand that. But if you're not providing that access for those students, they're going to go somewhere else who can, all right, or they're not coming at all.
Yeah, I think I agree, BD. It's important for that collaboration. And you're right. That good. My mom tells me, Stephanie, the government, Uncle Sam love you every time you get more money. I'm like, well, Uncle Sam, where's them coins? Because right now, living in Chicago, I need them coins back. But one of the concepts that we brought up is leadership. So we have all talked about the leaders of these education institutions, and have they showed up, or have they just completely just been disappointing, like underwhelming in many ways? And so I believe that, to me, leadership is tested in crisis. And I think some leaders have epically failed. I think that there's leaders that were horrible before COVID.
Absolutely.
And COVID just showed that they are still horrible. And it's like the kind of silent leaders, I feel like they rose at this time and showed up in ways that they could. But I just don't think that crisis management, like sometimes you think about interview questions like, how do you manage a crisis? Well, I know how to do blah, blah, blah. And I have this nice little document I put together to show you I can manage a crisis. But in the crisis, you looking crazy. You running around, don't know what you're doing, not asking questions, making decisions that don't make sense, not talking to anybody. And it's almost as if you lied. We seen your representative the whole time. You lied, and you're a horrible leader, and you should not have your job anymore. I'm sorry. Leadership is so important to me. And to me, leadership, the test, when a leader is tested, you truly know who they are and who they are not. And I think there's a lot of leaders that have been exposed during this time as not being the best leaders, period.
Well, I think sometimes, when you talk about crisis management, like everybody has this crisis plan and all that stuff, but when the crisis actually happens, sometimes the plan that you have isn't adequate to see you through it. So we have a school shooting crisis plan, and we actually had a school shooting at my school. So some of that crisis plan was fulfilled. Some of it wasn't, needed to be improved, but you don't know that until you're in the crisis, actually till after the crisis. You don't know how much the crisis plan didn't apply to the actual crisis. So, there was no way to really prepare for this. Like, even if you had some type of plan for a pandemic, which nobody did, there was really no way to plan for it. And so you were kind of going by the seat of your pants. And it seemed like, especially for my governor, did a really good job, I think. And it seemed like at first he was on it. Like it seemed to be all about the people and all about safety. And then more recently, I was like, somebody's pulling some strings behind him. And it became more and more evident that, it seemed like he really did care. Now, I believe he does, but again, I think the powers that be are really pressuring people to do something different and push a different agenda. So it's just disheartening. But crisis is so interesting because you can't really prepare for it. And then once it happened, you can see everything that you should have done. But now what?
And I agree. I think like many of us, if we look about the active shooter response plans that we have within K through 12 and through higher ed, many of us, we didn't create those until after I think it was like Virginia Tech shooting, or after I can think back to like when I was in high school, Columbine happened. Even then it was we didn't have plans until after the fact. So I get that aspect. And even as we talked about institutions having response plans to pandemic, I think like they said like the last pandemic was maybe 100 some years ago, or some time before many of us. So I get that aspect, but I think like you and Stephanie have said, like people are making decisions that are motivated financially, or they're motivated out of fear. So like there are some people, I will say this, I'm a diehard advocate if you know me for HBCUs. So no matter what, I'm looking to see what they're doing. In the response, a lot of the HBCUs took the hit financially and said, we're going to send all of our kids home because we don't know what this is going to do. We have no idea what this is going to do to our campus. So it's better off we send them back to their families and they be with their families. One school, I think it was Bennett or Benedict, one or the other, I think it's Benedict, sit there, like actually paid for their students to go home because many of the students did not have the finances to actually do that. That to me was an exceptional leadership. What scares me now is we have so many, again, schools are reopening within the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever the case may be. And you still have schools who have not said anything about their reopening plan. So it's like, so what do y'all plan to do? Because you want them to at least arrive prepared, or you're going to have families frantically trying to figure out how to send their kids back somewhere. Or when it comes to K through 12, you're going to have parents frantically trying to figure out how to either find babysitters or try to figure out how to accommodate working from home. It's so much uncertainty to me in that aspect. When it comes to leadership, it's like, well, what are y'all waiting on? And you have individual schools who are making decisions like today. So your kids arrive on Monday, you're saying all of a sudden we're going to not open. Like, hold on, wait, I done bought a ticket already. Am I getting my money back? Or you say we're going to open up, but yet you got to be here by Sunday. Who going to pay for my ticket? How am I going to get there? Or again, with the families, I got to find a babysitter. Like it's so, I think that to me, that leadership has been more so make a decision. I mean, and I get it from the financial aspect because most of us, we're driven by the money, but we already know the uncertainties behind this. Make the hard decision. We'll always figure it out. I mean, the government will figure it out and support somehow, some way. I mean, we always find a way. I think that's one of the things I like about the U.S. is we're resilient in some aspect. We'll figure it out. But right now, he's talking about saving the lives and really making something feel like some sort of normalcy. Make a decision so we can move forward to know what to do next. Right now, we're just really in limbo. That to me is terrible leadership. I just can't. The angst of it is really not helping us move forward.
So that's something too. Everything keeps changing. Like they make a decision and then it changes, and then they go back, then they change it again. So that's really frustrating.
So for me, like my heart goes out to leadership. Like we said earlier, I know it's hard in this position. However, some of the things we talked about are examples of bad leadership. Because if I have a crisis management plan, as a leader, I was supposed to make sure everybody knew it. When we were in school, we got on our knees outside the hallway and under desks because we practiced a tornado drill and we practiced it until we knew it. So if you were a leader, you were supposed to have that plan. The leader is supposed to be a visionary. Like that's your thing. You're supposed to be strategic and a visionary. We have operational managers, right? And not visionary leaders. And so we're stuck with people who don't have a plan, who aren't coming out with a plan. They're looking for other people to give them the ideas for a plan. If you didn't stop in April and say, listen, right now something's changing, we need to figure out a plan A and a plan B. We need to get something together. I know it may change later on, but we need to think innovatively and have a foresight to say, this is what could come. So let's do it. Like, I'm in recruitment. It's bad. I just talked to another recruiter today who was like, what are y'all doing? Like, they didn't have a plan. I was like, okay, well, listen, tell your team to get it together. Like, you gotta stop what you're doing. Anything that you had planned before April needs to stop. It's totally changed. You need to do something else. If you're planning on recruiting the same way, you need to change it. Pull your team together and say, and I'm not saying a leader has to make those decisions on their own. I'm not saying that. I think that's some of the problem, is that we have leaders who are in there making decisions by themselves and not talking to the rest of their staff or talking to those people who are really going through it. Like the people, like we said earlier, people making decisions on whether you're going back to school, but they don't have that same risk, right? But where are the innovative leaders? And I know they'll show up eventually. After this is over, we'll say this place did it well, this place did it well. But where are they now? Where are the partnerships? Why aren't the schools saying, hey, if you are a 4-year institution, you should be reaching out to every community college you know. If you know high school people, high school counselors are sending their students to community colleges. Like, if you're a community college, you should be partnering up with every 4-year institution, because you know the students that wanted to go to the 4-year are looking for a place to go to until they can get to that 4-year. And so those plans, where are they? Who's doing it? Where's the article saying this place is doing something phenomenal? And I had shared an article today about Southern University and what they're doing. And I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying a bad thing. I'm saying that that's one of the first positive articles that I've seen where people have said, like, this school has made a decision. This is what they're doing. The students are happy with it. The parents are okay with it, but this is what it is. Where's the rest?
You bring up an interesting point, Brandon. Our oldest child is a senior this year in high school. And so he's looking at going to some 4-year HBCUs next year. And we are in the application process. And so I'm trying to figure out a lot of things about the admissions process and how it's going to look for class of 2021. And specifically the HBCU. So a lot of the PWIs have made some decisions about like going test optional for ACT scores and things like that. But a lot of HBCUs have not said anything. And so it's really difficult to plan because at one point this pandemic will be over. You know what I mean? And things will be something. I don't want to call it normal, but things will be something. And we're trying to make some plans to get him on the right track and fulfill what he wants to do with his life. But because those entities don't have a plan, it makes it difficult for us who are trying to, move forward to do that. So that brings up interesting point that you just said.
And that's critical. If you're a 4-year institution and you have an ACT requirement, ACT is not happening right now. They're not taking that test. So any institution that has that requirement, you're a dead duck, bro. Like, nothing's happening. Kids are not coming unless they took it junior year and they got out early. And then we talk about all of us. I'm not saying, we're all different. Black people can be different. We are diverse. Just make that comment if you know what I'm talking about. But we all come from different backgrounds, but a lot of us are considered at-risk students, which means we took our test in April. We took our test during the summer. We're going to take it in September. We're last minute. That's just overall the generalization, is that we're at-risk students. And so if you had that requirement this summer and you didn't come up with the plan, any at-risk student wasn't able to get into your institution because they didn't take an ACT. They didn't graduate with that test. And that's, I think, why it bugs me so much about leadership. Like, I don't want to cuss, but get an effing plan. Like, get it together. Talk about it. What do we want to do? How do we meet up? How do we do this? Get the numbers right. And I was sitting there thinking, like, I won't say that, but Crow, we would have had a plan. Like, we would have
had it together. We would have had them students in there, or we would have had a plan for them. To your point, it frustrates me because all of a sudden, it's like colleges that don't have a reason to have like an elitist attitude had an elitist attitude in COVID. It's like there are hundreds, like, I don't know how many, but all of these schools that have done online learning. So you have South Hampshire, Southern New Hampshire University. You got Wake Forest. You have Capella. You have Western Governors University. You have Phoenix. I think they still around. You got Grand Canyon University. You have all of these online institutions, and I can speak for some colleagues that I've talked to. None of their institutions called any of these online schools to say, how do you do online advising? How do you maintain engagement with your students? How do you set up financial aid workshop stuff? How do you figure out the way in which your faculty members are truly having quality matters and efficient and effective in their course delivery? It's like all of a sudden we were just scattered, and there was not, I know in the midst of the pandemic people didn't have the time to stop and plan, but the it's showing up that you didn't stop and decide to just plan a little bit. Like some institutions said, okay, we're going to pause for a week, whether it was over spring break or something like that. But it's like everything became like a reactionary versus, even if you had a team that was like, okay, focus on the right now, this team focus on the planning. Like split your team up, put a lead over two teams, one focusing on let's maintain who's keeping the day-to-day, figuring that out, who's the planning team that's going to figure out what's happening the next 4 or 5 months down the line. We'll come together, meet on a weekly basis. How's everything going right now? Great. How's it looking for August? Great. It's like you had everybody galvanized around, okay, so tomorrow we're going to make sure Zoom works. But they got that Zoom bombing thing. So let's make sure we add passcodes. Oh, make sure you add the waiting room. Like, come on, y'all. Like, we're talking about PhDs and EDDs and PsyDs and all these Ds that didn't do a D thing to make sure we had our schools together. And it shows, and it's going to show for our students, because there's been some different reports and everything that talked about, students' experience during this time, talking about mental health, talking about online experiences. And one of the things that students said was that their inability to really connect online. It's like their faculty member put something up on a board, like a discussion board, and said, basically, post here and I'll holler at you later. But if I met with you 3 times a week in a class, and now you're just posting a question on a board, telling me to figure it out, that's a disconnect. So why didn't it's almost like we messed up as institutions, because it's not so much, as Courtney said, you can't necessarily plan for the pandemic, but did you develop your staff so that they'd be ready in case of anything? It's like you didn't develop people when you needed to develop people. Developing people on how to use online. You have a lot of faculty, some faculty, I don't want to say a lot, some faculty like, I'm not teaching online. I got my brick and mortar, I got my transparencies and my projector. That's what you don't have no projector in COVID, boo. So it's like you didn't force them to learn to get online. You may not have forced your advisors to use multiple methods to engage with students. So it's like when you don't push people to develop before a pandemic or before a crisis, then how do you expect them to show up in the crisis? They're going to show up the same hot mess that they were before. They're going to show that up now, and then you're going to be in a worse place. And the people at the end of the day that are impacted are the students. And that, to me, the leadership has not showed up.
And that's also an interesting point, because I think I saw an article within the past 2 weeks that talked about how the move to online learning has actually forced a lot of older faculty to retire because they refused or weren't comfortable enough to actually figure out how to use the online learning, the learning management system. So now you're talking about, again, you have institutions running to try to find faculty to teach courses. I just saw something today where Bethune-Cookman is looking for online instructors. So if you have a doctorate or a master's and you are looking for teaching online, Bethune-Cookman is looking for instructors. But even then, like, again, school starts in like 3 weeks. Why are we looking for instructors? Like that's another, like, this COVID has exposed us in so many different ways to where you aren't even prepared for faculty to walk away to make sure you had enough faculty to teach the classes for the kids that you want them to come back to. So it's like, what are we doing? What is the plan? You have, true, the schools, the brick and mortars could have reached out to the online class institutions to figure out how to transform their teaching to online. But again, the elite mindset. But now we're looking at this where we don't have a choice. We have to figure this out. We're scrounging around for faculty. We're scrounging around for classes to move our students to online, because majority we're used to them being in person. Like, it's so much. And again, classes begin for most schools within the next 3 weeks.
Something you said, Z, real quick, it made me think. So we've talked about how bad leadership has been, but something you said just triggered for me. And then one of the comments, hi, mommy, my mommy made a comment and it made me think of something where she had said, remote learning will be best. However, not everyone can learn from remote learning, which is so true, because I think about the way in which education, like for our seniors, our graduating seniors who lost this latter part of their senior year, then even our college seniors who lost the certain latter parts of experiences, or even like I have a younger sister who was entering her senior year and she was going to do an internship this year for college. She was going to do an internship at the end of her junior year to go into her senior year, and her internships, they didn't have them anymore. So I'm thinking about also the lack of the in-person opportunity, or the lack of the experiential opportunity. How will these students or these individuals look a year from now or 2 years from now, when we're expecting for them to show up on the job or show up in the college classroom? Because the same seniors that didn't finish out their senior year are the juniors right now, or freshmen or sophomores that are going through high school in this remote whatever. Are we going to admit them in the next year, 2 years, or 3 years? Because are we going to adjust ourselves to be okay? And are we going to add certain programs? So one of the things we were talking about in prepping for this, are schools doing any sort of kind of leveling up boot camps or something, because they knew that all the seniors across the country lost like the latter kind of quarter of their year? It's kind of like, after all of this progresses, it's not so much after all of this progresses, how are we truly adjusting right now to fill in those gaps of the lost learning that occurred, so that these students don't miss out on what they need to then, be ready for the job or the college or things like that they're missing out on due to time, due to the remote space only, or the hybrid trying to figure out whatever. Yeah.
One of the things I'm hoping for, especially for the high school, seniors matriculating to college, our local community college has a summer institute anyway, where it's free for all high school grads to come and attend. I forget how the program runs, but it's to bridge that gap between senior year and college freshman year. And so my hope is that they will be kind of looking at that curriculum to help, bridge some of those gaps, because we all know that it happened, and my concern is mainly math for those seniors who graduated this past year, and even English as well. But the AP students who were really trying to get that last little bit of information, who won't get it anymore, or they'll get just kind of a watered down version of it. But my hope is that, and I hate to put this much pressure on any, particular structure, but because our community college was already built to kind of do that, I'm hoping that they'll look at, those gaps and find an opportunity to serve those students moving forward. But that's only for the students who know about the program and actually plan on taking advantage of it. So, maybe in the high school sector, we need to do a better job of pushing those kids into that program, because it is something that's free and it is available to all students. And even if you're not going to go to a 4-year school, you can still do that program. So that needs to probably be, like Brandon mentioned, some collaboration between the high schools and the community colleges, so that they can be ready if they choose to go on to a 4-year school, or even continue at a community college level.
I'm because I'm in recruitment, I'm nervous just about that transition and what that looks like, and what we're doing and what the plan is. And I'm not particularly talking about one institution. I'm talking about all of us. What does this look like for the seniors who are coming in? And then once they get there, what does that look like while they're there? So, and my heart is always with those at-risk students, or those students who are kind of like me. And so, if I needed a lot of us, I succeeded at a HBCU because of the environment. I was put in a place where I was surrounded by people who were I don't want to say educated, but who had a same goal, same focus, and I was in an education environment. And so without that, what now are we offering? Like, how do I still do that? Who's helping me at home? And it's hard. I'll still work with students who were taking classes over the summer, we're finishing out that year, and you can see the level of difficulty. Like, I'm no longer, and even for us, like I work from home now, and it's difficult to work from home. I got this dog barking all the time. I got people calling. I'm distracted by the TV. The refrigerator went out. Somebody had to come fix it. There's life that happens at home, and going to college separated me from that. It separated me from having to deal with whatever was going on in my home. Food was already provided. I had the shelter that I needed. I had friends that I could study with. And so those students who need that, what services are we providing for them? And I know, people say, well, we have services, but if a lot of us aren't coming to ask for them, we weren't asking for them before, you had to come get us to come participate in those. How are they getting it now? And if you're saying that services moved to a web meeting or a Zoom meeting, that's not what we need. So it goes back to that leadership. What are we thinking? What are we doing? And are we going to miss out? Are those students going to come to a college and then fell out,
Yeah, Brent, I think you hit on the whole aspect of the mental health, or the kind of balancing yourself out. And I like to use the term harmonizing versus balancing. That's a whole nother thing as well. But kind of how are we thinking through the mental health of our students, our staff, our faculty, like the parents of the students, like all of these different things? Because as you said, Brandon, I mean, we, working together for several years, I mean, we would go to the places and recruit, and the kids was like, okay, so, Mr. Davis, so get me this, and I'll get there. I remember my sister and I used to do this, in one of the male residence halls. My sister and I used to do this kind of, we called it a rap session, and we would talk to all the guys about different topics. And I remember one of the young men saying, like, I came here with my book bag, and I don't even think he came with a pillow, but he left from where he was and he knew he needed to be there. But if there is no there, like, I don't think he would have came to college. And so I think, like, the mental stress of those students that say, I can't go away, I'm not going away. There is no going away at this moment. I am staying at home to go online. And so that's, once again, I think, as Court said earlier, like that whole kind of two sides of it, and the mental anguish of like not being able to go away, or the mental concern about, can I do this? Can I do this online thing? Will there be support? Will there be quiet in my house? Like, I live by myself and Daisy snores, and I'm glad I tried to not kind of nudge her so she didn't snore tonight. But I mean, it's stressful. It's stressful getting up to make this happen. I could imagine if I had a house full of people. And so I think it's like understanding what does that look like mentally for people to process during this time, to have that level of success, that level of engagement. Yeah.
I wonder if colleges could, I mean, this is a massive undertaking. It's just me thinking out loud. I wonder if there could be an opportunity where they set up hubs in different cities of their students, to where maybe once a month or something, they can come in a structured setting, social distancing and everything, and have that community feel and have that opportunity to socialize and, just be with each other, and still be able to experience the college, some type of college connection with people before they can return to their campuses. That would be something that would be cool to create for them, some type of space where they can come, maybe every month or so.
I love y'all.
I'll wait for Brandon. Like, come on.
Like, Brandon already got it. Like, he's about to go ahead, Brandon. Go ahead.
No, I know what we're all thinking, but we're not going. I'm not going to go there because people don't think I'm crazy. They're going to judge me. Yeah, but
you be you. I choose you, Brandon. I choose you to be you today.
No, they don't think I'm nuts. But I'm with that 100%. I think that goes back into the innovative leadership. You can tell you're an innovative thinker when you thought of that. Where's the partnership? Why aren't we partnering with the libraries in the city and saying, all right, listen, y'all are struggling to get people in. We got the students struggling with class. Let's put partnerships with our alumni. Let's put partnerships with libraries and get students hubs where they can do education. Let's partner with the community colleges, get hubs where people can have that in-class experience, or at least come there and get the tutoring and get the help that's in person. And maybe, you know, there's a shield in front of you or whatever you do, but that comes with the innovative thinking that we're missing. You know, that comes with the meeting at the table that we're not having, that discussion that says, what can we do? What barriers can we lift for students? How can we make this easier? And I think for us, this community, but especially us, we've seen this happen before. Like, you know, the reality of this situation is that as students leave, revenue decreases, which means institutions are going to want to concise, right? Which means layoffs, it means defunding of programs, it means all of that, right? And I think a lot of institutions may not have seen that before, but I've seen it. Like, I've been through that. I know what it looks like to have that conversation. We're not gonna make this emotional because we only got 2 lines, but I've had that conversation where, you know, somebody's called me and said, hey, Brandon, you know, if you don't make the class, you know, I gotta let people go. Like, you know, I have to sit in the room and decide who's not coming to work tomorrow. You know, I remember I had this is an outside company, but a vendor that worked for me, and he didn't get his check on time. And he called me and had me in tears because he was like, listen, I'm a small company. If I don't get that check on Thursday, then on Friday, none of my staff gets paid. Like, nobody. I'm depending on you to pay me, because I just bawled in my room, like, I'm gonna find the money, I'm gonna get it. Like, but honestly, that's the reality of this situation, is that not just our students lose, your staff loses, everybody loses if you don't get together and come up with a plan, start being innovative and figure this out. And I know, like I said earlier, there is no right answer right now. There is no correct thing to do. Everybody's in a different situation. Nobody's going to be happy with whatever you decide, right? But the reality is that if you don't have a plan, if you don't make this work, you're not just talking about some students who didn't get a great education that year. You're talking about something massive. You're talking about closures. And the majority of those people who they're predicting are going to close are our institutions. Those are us. You know, this small liberal arts college means mostly Black kids. That is definitely what you're saying. You know, in other institutions, I know you haven't seen it, you haven't lived through it. You might not have had that conversation before, but it's the reality. I had a vice president, I met with her and she talked to me one time and totally changed everything about the way I look at budgeting. And I was coming up with all these ideas. It was like, oh yeah, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. And she didn't work with me. She was just somebody I met at Noel Levitt's. And she was like, I don't spend money like that. Every dime that I spend, you know, I have to reconcile. Those are tax dollars that came out of somebody's check. And so I don't buy stuff that I don't need. Everything has data behind it. If you send a postcard out, is it going to be effective? It doesn't have the right message on it. Are students going to read it? What's going to happen when it goes? Otherwise, it's a waste of money. And you didn't just waste your money. You wasted America's money. You wasted the tax dollars from the student who works at McDonald's. You wasted their money because you didn't think enough and you didn't plan enough to have a reality to say, like, listen, this is effective. Everything has to be data driven. Like, you gotta think of you just, I don't know, I'm getting emotional, so we're not gonna talk no more. And we like so over time. But yeah, I know, like, I just get worked up on that. Like, come on now. Come on, be intentional. Be intentional, stop, breathe, think about what you're doing, how this affects more than just you. You know, I come to work, yeah, the budget is already there, it's loaded, but where did that money come from? And if it's not there, what happens? If it's not there, what happens? If I don't bring in a class, Zakia has to say which program she's going to cut. Okay. So now the students in Green Hall don't have the program that they needed for such and such, which also means that they don't get the education they need. It means they're struggling in courses because they didn't have the programs that they needed. They didn't have the mental health that they needed. And so now I've sent them home with a student loan that they can't pay back. You know, this is a whole cycle that goes together. And it frustrates me to the core for leadership not to see that. Like, and I'm looking for the article. I'm looking for somebody to say, like, this school did it well. This school made it happen. This school got the partnerships. I was at the gym thinking, like,
Come through. When Brandon goes, we gotta let him go.
No, don't let me go. Stop me.
Come on.
Stop me.
No, Brandon, that is.
I was about to get my church fan and
right,
get the.
Come on.
Say that.
It's true, yo. I clown a lot, but it's true. It's real. People have to see it. You have to go through that call and tell people like, no, well, let somebody know they're not gonna have a job. You know, no, you're not gonna be able to afford toilet paper for all the residence halls this year. So move some money around.
Yeah. That's yeah, Brandon. I don't even know what to say after that. Was real talk, bro. Because if we don't look at the people, if we don't think about the people behind the decisions, and it's not an easy. You're right. It's not an easy decision because, like you said, if I decide to stay closed, am I not accessible? If I decide to open, am I now creating a hotbed? If I don't have what it's like, all those different kind of decisions. But like you said, make a decision or bring people to the table that have showed up before that can help you make it. Like it's the decision makers aren't always at the top. The people at the top many times don't even have the influence that don't even have the influence to actually make the things happen. And that's kind of seen one of the messages before, like, how do you kind of deal with those leaders that don't want to make decisions? Sometimes you got to be an influencer on the ground. Sometimes you got to galvanize people. And I've learned that in my career. Yeah, I may not have had that top position, but how do I go to my left and to my right and like, okay, y'all, let's think this through. Let's go to our leadership with some solutions, some ideas. Because if I wait for them to make a decision for what's happening over here, they're going to make the bad decision because they don't know what happens here. So how do we, be innovative in our pocket? And then when they come, like, okay, you all, this is the decision we're going to have to make. And you can say, well, hold on, have you considered this point? Consider this. So it's like asking yourself, is there a space for me to be innovative? Is there a space for me to reach out and connect with students? Like, I look at us that our job has never been just within the four walls of the institution within the hours of 9 to 5. I mean, our jobs have always been the after hours, the weekends, and it's like, but it's those experiences, those after hours and weekends is what kept students in school. And so during a time like this, how do you, somebody that may not be in the leadership role, still level up, still show up for the students because they're going to come to you? Like, how do you create that pod of support amongst yourselves, faculty, staff, ground people to say, okay, you all, let's think about this. Let's think about how we can connect our students to each other. Let's, explore some other opportunities. Because once again, if we're waiting for them to make the decision at the top, we're going to be waiting and then we're going to have a whole nother semester with a whole hot mess. And I'm not saying every leader is horrible. There are some really standout leaders, presidents of institutions. But once again, like I shared an article with them, with the group earlier, that, the institution I work for, that our unionized staff is talking about doing a health strike. And a part of their concerns were that you didn't ask us. You didn't ask us how to do this. You didn't ask us our opinion on what this could look like, because we could have told you ways that we could work together to help our students. And so sometimes I'm asking myself, and I talk to my staff about this all the time, like, okay, y'all, let's think about this. Like, sometimes it's not waiting for them to tell us. It's about us coming together to figure out, okay, what if we talk to this group over here? And we're not talking about convening to try to overturn. Like, I'm not talking about we didn't have some of that in some other situations, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about let's galvanize for the sake of our students to talk about strategies, innovations to support. And it's not necessarily about getting more money, because there's things you can do. It don't cost, to the point, or the example that was brought up, that Z, I think, brought up, or Brandon, like calling the local library and say, hey, we want to, is there an opportunity for us to, use some of your computers to bring some students from this particular neighborhood? And we just say, okay, 2:00 on Tuesdays, we're meeting here to log into class together. You know what I mean? So how do you work on the ground. Because when we think about a lot of the movement in our history, it happened not necessarily from the leaders at the top. It happened with the people in the communities to saying change needs to come. And so how do we show up as those people to really, many times manage up or many times galvanize people to the point where it's like, let's do this, let's be the change, let's do what needs to happen. So I think there's that opportunity within this space as well.
So I want to add, because I also want to make sure we pull Court in, but so as people are listening, and if you are a community organizer or someone who's definitely interested in figuring out how do we sustain our communities after COVID, so I'm thinking about ways to make that connection. So one thing, as Stephanie and Brandon were talking, I'm thinking like, what about these high school kids? Like, are we able to, like that hub concept, have the hub in the high school to where our college students are working with our high school kids to help them get prepared for going to college, because they're going to also have this impact. You're talking about some young people who've never done remote online learning in K through 12, and this is going to be a huge struggle for them. And even this past year, when I taught a freshman seminar, many of those young people had never had a class online. So even me trying to get them to just go on to our online learning management system, they had no clue even how to navigate it. And we have this expectation that this generation is so tech savvy that they know how to navigate everything. They don't. There's a learning gap there. And there, again, access, equity, resources. The schools that I really know, K through 12, who have had online classes, are either those schools that had students who were so at risk that they could not go into a classroom in a brick and mortar, that they had to go online to finish their high school degree, or it was the more affluent resource surplus is the schools that had the online learning as part of their curriculum to prepare them for college. So you still have that gap of young people who have no idea that they could actually complete their entire degree online, or even have that confidence to do so. Because as one of our viewers said, like, not everybody learns well online, but there's also a confidence thing. Am I confident in my ability to actually grasp everything that's going to come to me from this computer, to comprehend it, articulate it back, and still pass this class? That's a huge intimidation for some of our young people, some of our people, to go online and actually just take a class. So I would love to see us even talk about what do we do moving beyond this. So that to me is another part of the planning part. Like, we want these kids to come to school at some point, even after we figure out a vaccination, even after we have lower numbers, even after we figure out how to manage a crisis management plan. What do we plan to do to prepare some of these young people? Because they're going to be the ones we end up getting another year or two, who've had from my experience, this is going to be a horrible year for them because it's so much uncertainty. It's going to be so much inconsistency. You have some kids who are going to school online for the first semester, then coming to class come January, or they're doing online for 3 weeks and then coming to class. Like, we are so inconsistent across the country. And we want these young people to come to our schools, our colleges and universities for their freshman year, whether it's online, community college, whatever. We aren't setting them up for success, and we know our society. Our society is quick to weed out people. So we're quick to say, well, you didn't do, even though there was a global pandemic, you didn't have this experience, but this person did. Again, have-nots. So we're going to pick them over you because you didn't get an internship, or you didn't have this class, or you didn't do this lab because the lab is required to be done in person, but yet you couldn't do the in person because your school was online for the first year after it's going to be such a mess when the dust settles. Like, are we really thinking about the long-term impact? So yes, leadership, I'm just going to say that I really hope there are intentional conversations that are going beyond the money. Like, we're talking about developing people for our society to be productive citizens, to be contributors to our livelihood, to our future. It's not just the money aspect. We figure out the money. And if it's more, if it's merging institutions or whatever, we figure that part out. Again, the US, we end up being resilient, innovative. We figure some stuff out. But are we really being intentional about what we're deciding in this moment, and not looking at, well, we got to make our numbers? Because yes, people are going to lose their job. I've seen so many people furloughed and laid off. I get it. It's gonna happen. But that's not just K through 12. It's not just higher ed. That's the entire country. unemployment is high. You have people who are still waiting to see if they're going to get their job back, and we're opening the country back. The economy has opened back up. You still have people unemployed. What's the opening back up? You still have people who don't have jobs. So what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? What is the global plan behind, specifically looking at education? What are we doing? Where the conversation? So community activists, if you're out there, find some way to bridge the gap and help us. Don't just look at the schools and say, well, schools, what are y'all doing? K through 12, what are you doing? Higher ed. No, come and help us, specifically those who either went to college or those who wish they had or didn't have the opportunity to do so, but see the value in it. Create that bridge. This is the time for us as a society, as a country, to come together and talk about what we're going to do to make things better, to mend this tragedy of a global pandemic.
Yes. This has been good, y'all. This has been good. I'm trying to make sure that we cover majority of our topics that will keep us in a nice time, or did we miss it? Is there anything else that we wanted to make sure we hit on? Because y'all, we can be here all night, but it would still be good. But we're not going to do that to y'all.
No, we're not.
Well, I do just want to say that this conversation has really opened my eyes to finding ways that I can extend myself to those other entities, because as a high school counselor, it's not just about college. It's about the workforce preparation, military preparation, whatever. And so I think I definitely have some work to do that I didn't even think about before an hour and a half ago, that I need to be, in the planning of kind of, working with these other people on how to make sure that my students are successful for whatever they choose to do after high school. But this has really opened my eyes to being innovative and creating and developing and sustaining some partnerships that we have with some other community organizations and community colleges and four-year institutions and the military and all those things. So I thank you guys for having me on here, because I'm a little bit smarter now, and I know how I need to move now for this year. So thank you guys for that.
Well, thank you, Court. You contributed so much to the conversation. I think your voice as being a parent and being in the K through 12 system is so important. And so, as always, does any Z or Brandon, do you all have any final thoughts that you want to say?
No, I think I've spoken way too much. So we.
I think I agree. I think I have oversaid what I need to say. But, no, just everybody think of a plan. Let's survive this. At the end of the day, we want to make it through and survive and keep as much as we can. We know that we're going to lose some. Like, it's inevitable. You're going to lose somewhere. But if we can save just a little bit, as much as we possibly can, by planning and thinking and being innovative and having foresight, then do it. Like, do it.
Good. Well, this is awesome. And so if there's anyone out there that is needing your institution made over or overhauled, there are 4 individuals right here. We will come in and do it and make sure that at the end of the day, your enrollment increases, your retention increases, and your students are healthy and whole. We got those skills right here. So, So we always, at the end of all of our broadcasts, we like to ensure that people know how to connect with us, how to learn more about us individually or collectively. So, Court, do you want to share just a little bit, briefly about your organization that supports young people, and if folks are interested in becoming connected, how can they do so?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I would love to. I'll try to be as brief as possible. I am the founder and CEO of an organization called Me First Queens, and it is our mission to impart the audacity in young teen girls of color to put themselves first in all that they do. And so I work with high school age girls, and we have a whole curriculum that we follow that helps them become really whole as one complete person. My website is Me First Girls, with the S at the end, mefirstgirls.com. And my email address is on there as well. So I hope you guys will take a look at what I've been doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandon.
What are we doing? I forgot.
We are just sharing any, we always give how do people connect with
Okay, cool.
connect with us.
Got you. All right. Well, yeah, Highly Revered. We all have our separate podcasts. My podcast is the Highly Revered podcast. It is everywhere, so just look for it. It's Facebook, Twitter, iHeartRadio, Spotify, everything. Yeah, that's it.
So I have the Sankofa Experience podcast that is also found everywhere: Apple Music, Spotify. Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Anchor. However, I'm taking a small hiatus with finishing this doctoral dissertation proposal. So please pray for me, y'all. But you have enough episodes to catch up. And then I will be having some healing spaces through the Sankofa Experience Healing Project, where I invite men and women, specifically African-American men and women, in different spaces to have conversations for us to heal collectively from generational pain that we continue to bring forward into our future relationships with one another.
Awesome. So I am the author of Free Your Mind with Dr. K. And my podcast, you can find me on Anchor, Podbean, Spotify. I'm going to branch out into some other things soon. Also in the process, I've launched my YouTube channel, Free Your Mind Enterprises YouTube channel. So I'm excited about that. Also, you can visit my website, which is www.fyme.org. And that's, of course, FYME, Free Your Mind Enterprises. And I'd love to engage, connect with folks. And then I recently launched another Facebook page called Refreshed and Revealed. It is a page focused on spiritual growth and development. And so Z and I have a Monday night Bible study, if you want to join us there, talking about identity and knowing who you are. So we're excited about that. And so, of course, we like to thank you all for joining us this evening. And as we typically sign off, as I sign off of my broadcast, I always say it's important for you to continue to free your mind.
So I took in mind with live your Sankofa experience, which is do not be afraid to reach back into your past to be able to live a productive future.
And I just end mine. Like, I just hang
out. I don't have a podcast, but my tagline is choose your crown over the crowd.
Oh, I like that.
I do want to add this, though. Make sure this conversation keeps going, because I feel like there's so many people who need to hear this and need to talk about it and have those ideas and share this. Like, if you are able to share this with a colleague, share this with somebody else who's going through it, and then have that discussion. I hate for this just to be the people here. Like, share this with other people and have this same discussion. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and end.